Hey everybody, Ty here. Apologies for this late video. A lot of that has to do with the timing in which the ensembles upload in comparison to the operational global models here. Because with us looking over the tropics, it's really better to use the ensembles in this case. Nothing against the global models for the most part, but it's kind of a quirky thing. I'm actually working on making a video to explain all of that. It's going to be included in the model cusp video and just kind of a breakdown of all the weather models here. So look forward to that. That'll probably be uploaded sometime this week from the looks of it. But we'll have to see how things go with severe weather and so on and so forth. We'll get into all those other details in another video very soon. But in any case, though, the Atlantic, especially over towards the main development region, is really starting to heat up over here. In particular, we've been watching this area off the West African coast. If you look on satellite imagery right here, you can see where our two invests actually are. This is our first one here. This is Invest 96L. Kind of coming apart, if I'm being honest. At one point, this had a 50 to 60% chance of development, and now we're dropping all the way down to 20. There is still a chance that we could have development in a marginally conducive environment, but really where the good stuff is much further to the south of where this feature is currently. This system, I think, is running into a lot more in the way of dry air, and as a result, it's going to end up slowing this thing down a bit. But over here, if this can stay off to the south in comparison to this, we might be talking about our next named storm. And by the way, the next name would be Aaron. This area here has a 60% chance of developing within the next several days here. If you look at it on satellite, it looks pretty good coming off the West African coast here. The environment's become more favorable over time as we've gone on here. So where this storm may not have been able to capitalize, this one might. So it'll be really interesting to see how things develop with this as we go here. I'm going to actually do a quick thing before we get into the model data here. And we're going to go ahead and look at the water vapor imagery, because I do think that that had a pretty big part in why this other system has been struggling and maybe even failing. I mean, there's still a decent amount of water available here, but the moisture content seems to be a whole lot better here. I'm trying to get a little bit better version of the water vapor imagery here, but I'm kind of limited with what I have available. We'll go back to the infrared symmetry signatures here, because these brighter colors here are showing our colder cloud tops, which means taller clouds. Usually our taller clouds are associated with thunderstorms, so on and so forth. You kind of get the gist of it really from here. Whenever you see those white colors here, those are really cold cores or heated towers that are coming up into the atmosphere. And you, like, again, as I mentioned before, you know how thunderstorms work. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the meat of the video, of course, which is the model data. And we'll kind of go on from that point as well. So, I mean, really, if you think about it, there's no secret. We already know the deal here in regards to the tropics. Waters are very warm over here across the Atlantic as a whole. Hasn't really been too much in the way of activity to really cause any sort of cold pulls up towards the surface here. And wind shear has been progressively weakening over towards this area as time's gone on. This high pressure has been kind of retreating or kind of meandering back towards the north central parts of the Atlantic here. So if we were to keep the ball rolling with both of these, we're going to show the GFS and the Euro ensembles here. Euro ensemble is a little bit older, but the 18Z run doesn't really have the same kind of range. So as we move forward here, the main point of interest, of course, the main development region is what we're going to be looking at. Again, notice that wind shear is very, very light. And we're going to have to be keeping our eyes out for a couple of other features as we continue to go forward towards this area, especially throughout the rest of this run as we head into the middle part of August. This is about the time where we get into peak hurricane season, so it's not surprising to see this. So I'm not saying that this is anything out of the norm, but this is the time of year where we watch this area for the potential for development and also growth within tropical cyclones here. So again, nothing too far out of the ordinary, I would say. But I'd say at this point, this would be our most considerable concern, I would say, if there is to be one at all, would be from any tropical systems here at this point. But again, it doesn't matter which model we look at here, whether it's the European ensemble, GFS ensemble, the wind shear definitely lightens up. The Euro tends to give this a much better chance than previously forecasted here in regards to its wind shear. Wind shear is almost in an ideal spot for this. Ultimately, the Euro kind of has this turning out to sea still at the end of the day. And I think a lot of that's really going to have to do with this storm's overall development. If it strengthens early, it's more likely to make that turn sooner. If it stays on the weaker side, it could ride its way all the way over towards the Antilles. But even then, by that point, I think with the environment being set in the way that it is, it'll only end up forcing the storm to turn out to sea. And GFS is still kind of on board with the Euro here, which is pretty good considering throughout the year there's been a lot of model disagreement between the two when it comes to really just about anything this year, whether it's hurricanes or severe weather. So that's one pro. It doesn't look like in the long term that's going to head towards the U.S. at this time. Obviously now we're looking well past 10 days in advance, so I am not going to go on that hill and say that it's exactly what's going to happen, but at least at this point in time, things aren't looking too bad. So let's go ahead and move on to another model here. We're shifting our attention over to the operational runs here so we can look at the moisture content over the Atlantic. So obviously we're going to be showing the Euro and the GFS. And I think the biggest inhibiting factor with 96L had a lot to do with the dry air. And then as we continue to move forward here, we'll see that dry air continue to be a factor. Now the operational runs aren't quite as accurate as the ensembles, and they can sometimes be a bit more aggressive. You see a great example of a great reflection of that within the GFS here. Look at how it has this storm strengthening so quickly here. This becomes almost a major hurricane and then actually does make a close approach, if not potentially a landfall up towards the northeast coast. Of course, we're well past 300 hours out at this point, and I'm not willing to really put any merit into that whatsoever. We see these runs all the time, every year, and I'm not going to hype up something that probably isn't going to happen. I'm sure hoping it doesn't, but I'll be keeping an eye on this run in the future. But also, one thing that I have made note of, and the GFS can be good with for this reason sometimes too, it shows additional lows popping up over here. So in the long range, like I said, we're really just going to have to keep watching this out, or West African coast, I should say, going forward here. Now the Euro, it does show increased activity as well. Now the European operational run doesn't really have this turning into much of anything. In fact, it kind of does the same thing as 96L. Doesn't really even get itself organized, and that is due in large part to the dry air that is out ahead of this. It's going to help keep that storm relatively weak. This feature here does kind of interest me in the long run, but of course, again, just like with the GFS, we're in the long range here, and that's when things kind of get wacky with the models at times. So not something that I would read into too heavily, but definitely a trend that I'm going to be keeping an eye out for in the future. But again, just like with the GFS run here that we're seeing, we see more low pressure areas kind of popping up over towards this main development region. Goes along perfectly with the time of year. We can expect to see more of that as we continue to go through the month and into September, which is our official peak of hurricane season. So let's go ahead now and take a look at our ensemble members. So we're back to the ensemble data, thank goodness. So obviously, since Euro has slightly older data, we're going to go with that. So we'll put a loop on both of these. Of course, we'll look at the GFS first since it's the main part of the screen that you're seeing here. Now, obviously, we're looking at our low pressure centers here. There's, like I said, even though for the most part, I would say that 97L is not a threat to U.S. land at this point in time, I'm still not going to rule that out just yet. Any sort of subtle change with this ridge that we're seeing over here could ultimately change the track. Now, a majority of the ensemble members still have this heading out to sea, so that's a reassuring fact from the ensemble models. If we look at the European here, it's kind of a similar deal. Very few of them, until the latter half of the run, end up showing anything affecting U.S. soil at this time. Even the Antilles don't really seem like they're under the gun as of yet. Now, obviously, we have to keep an eye on that because models change and trends occur pretty quickly. So by the time we get into the overnight and beyond, we could be looking at something entirely different. So like I said, we'll probably end up doing a tropical update within the coming days. We'll see how things progress from there. We'll make update videos as we go along as well, maybe even shorts. But for the most part, like I said, I wouldn't be too concerned about much of anything right now. That's why I didn't highlight any parts of the coast here. We're not, like I've said plenty of times before, we're not a channel that's really about hyping up anything. But just a reminder, it is hurricane season, that's for sure. So now that we've talked about that, let's go ahead and get the models off of here and just kind of focus in on our blend of ensemble models that we're seeing as well. And it just really is a show of the times. Like I said, getting towards peak hurricane season, we see this a lot. And for the most part, like I said, everything is, for the most part, staying away from land. There is an interesting low pressure feature that I was seeing over here towards the beginning of a run that makes an attempt at developing. But for one, it stays relatively weak and would most likely just cause shower and thunderstorm activity over the deep south and southeast and east coast, but doesn't really get much of a chance to even develop to begin with. Now again, notice with these features right here, a lot of them just end up turning out to sea. And this is a typical thing because usually we have a high pressure system that's right here, and that clockwise spin as these storms stay to the south of there just end up getting caught up, especially as these storms really start to ramp up and they end up getting just kicked out to sea. This could be a point of interest for Bermuda, but it's a little bit too early to tell. But you can see that the potential is definitely there within the tropics nonetheless. With that being said though, that's pretty much all I got for this video. I'll have another one up for you guys tomorrow. Hopefully it'll be in a little bit better of a time frame since models took forever to load today. But till then, everyone have a wonderful rest of your night, and I will see you next time.